Everybody's wrong. Rewrote the song. Thoughts become action. Tell me what's happening. What's your mind wrapped around?
Hey guys, so this is going to be a bit of a follow-up to the other hand lettering tutorials for beginners. And I actually haven't created any templates or guides for you guys to follow along with. So this tutorial is going to be me showing you how to use the guide that I've just made. So what I did was basically draw out the skeleton of the letter forms that I usually draw, and then vectorized those, adding arrows to show which direction each stroke goes in. There'll be a link in the description where you can download this, and there will also be a download link to a version which I have actually gone over with a brush pen, so you can use that as a bit of a reference point. The way you can use these guides is either print them out and draw directly on top of them, or if you've got tracing paper, you could simply put tracing paper over the top and do the lettering onto the tracing paper. Or another alternative would be, if you've got a light box, then of course put this underneath and then put a plain piece of paper on top and you can use it that way. And that'd save you printing multiple copies out every time you want to use it. Okay, so the pen I'm going to be using for this is the Sharpie fabric marker. The reason I'm using this is because personally it's my favourite brush pen at the minute. Like, this changes quite a lot, but as of now this is currently my favourite brush pen. I find that strokes tend to be much smoother, and for me it's just easier to control. The only downside to this pen is that it's a fabric marker, so the ink's really wet, meaning that they run out quite quickly. So bear that in mind if you're planning on buying some of these, but I would definitely recommend buying them. So as you can see, at the bottom here there's some short and simple instructions of how to use this. So it says orange arrows equals starting stroke. So wherever these orange arrows are, that's where you start your stroke. Up arrows are thin strokes, so any arrows going in the upward direction would be a thin stroke. And down arrows are thick strokes, so any strokes going in the downward direction would be thick. Any arrows that are going horizontal can be thick or thin, that just completely depends on what you want to do. So you can experiment with that, and you can also experiment with the letter forms themselves once you've got used to the basic structure of them. So what I'll do is I'll just go through a couple of the letters to show you how to use this template, and like I said before, there'll be a download link in the description for both this version and the completed version, so you can use it as a reference. Okay, so we'll start off with the letter A, and I'll just zoom in actually so it's a bit easier for you to see. There we go. So you've got the letter A, and as you can see the orange arrow is at the start here, so this would be a thin stroke up, and then as you come around it'd be a thick stroke down, followed by another thin stroke up, and a thick stroke down, and a little thin flick there at the end. And of course when you're connecting this to another letter, what you'd do is you just bring the thin stroke right up and then connect it. So go on the first letter first and show you. So thin stroke, down to a thick stroke, back up thin again, and thick back down with a little flick. And you don't have to do all this in one stroke, of course you can take the pen off, reposition your hand to get the next stroke. So I'll do the letter B, thick stroke down, thin stroke up, round, thick stroke down, and then back. Let's go to the letter C. So do a thin stroke up, starting with the orange arrow, thick stroke down, and a thin stroke back up again. Let's go. I'll do the top line of the top row, and then I'll do a couple on each different row. So we'll just do all the top ones first. So the D is pretty much the same as the A that we just did, except from this stroke here goes to the top. So let's go like we did with the A, thin stroke, go around to a thick stroke, and back up to thin. And what I tend to do is, when I'm not using a guideline, I would just bring this thin stroke right up to the top, and then press down to bring a thick stroke down. But as this guideline shows, you'd stop here and then bring a thick stroke down, but of course you can do, so I'll show you what I would normally do. So you just go straight up and then bring the thick stroke back down, just to make sure it's all aligned properly. But of course you can just do thin stroke, stop here, and then do the thick stroke down. That's completely up to you how you want to do it. So do the letter E, just start down here with the orange arrows, with a thin stroke. Well, this could be thick or thin because it's sort of horizontal. So this is completely up to you, whichever way you want to do it. So I'm just going to do a thin stroke. Bring it thin, go on to a thick stroke, and back up to a thin stroke again. Now, you might not be able to follow these exactly how they are, and that's completely fine. You don't have to follow it perfectly. As you can see, there's some grey bits here where I've not followed it perfect. but just find out what's most comfortable for you and how it looks best when you do it. So start with the F, we do a thick stroke down from the top, curve it round with a thin stroke back, sort of loop it inside here. It's kind of hard to see on the little template that I made. There's a little bit of a bump coming out the side here where you'd actually loop it. You don't have to bring it out the back here like that. You don't have to do that, but you can do. And just add a flick there, so you don't have to follow the guide perfectly. Like I said before, you can do whatever looks best. So I've added a little flick, and I've chose to go with a thick line. So let's go to the letter G, which is essentially just the A and the D, but with a flick at the bottom. So start with a thin line, and with a thick, back up with a thin line, thick line down, and then round with a thin flick. And with these as well, you can add it, you can make it thick at the end if you like, it's completely up to you, but more often than not you'll want to keep it thin, because if you're connecting it to another letter, you'd bring it up and round like this. So, for example, if you was keeping it thin and you were connecting it to another letter, you'd be doing it like this. But that's not on the guide, that's just how most people would do it. So, go to the letter H, start at the top with a thick stroke, bring it down. Then you're going to go up with a thin stroke, back round, down with a thick one, and then a little thin flick at the end. Letter I, do thick stroke down, a little flick there. And then with the dot is, you can either draw a circle or you can just put a little mark like that, whichever suits you best. So now I'll just do a couple of letters off each row. So I'll start with the letter K, since it's not a particularly easy letter compared to some of the other ones. So start off here at the top with a thick stroke down like a lot of the other letters are. And then when you get there, you're going to bring up a thin stroke around here, and then it's going to come around and go thick back to there, and then you do another thick stroke down. And what I like to do when I go for the flick at the bottom, because I normally hold a pen like this, it's hard to get a thick stroke, so I like to manoeuvre my hand around a bit of an angle like this, rather than being there. Bring it there, and you'll get a thicker stroke because of how you're placing the pen on the paper. So, do a thin stroke up, thick back round, and then as I said before, manoeuvre your hand round to the side so you can get another thick stroke, and then a thin flick at the end there. Now you've got a nice letter K. I'll do a letter M because the end's pretty much the same, just without one of the strokes, so I'll do that. So it's a thick stroke down, thin stroke back up, round, and you can add a little bit of a point at the bottom if you like there, so a bit more character to it. And then again, thin stroke up, thick stroke back down, a little flick. And the N would essentially just be this first section, and then with a little flick at the end. Let's do the P. Let's do a thick line down, and then bring the thin line up, disconnecting about here, around this area. Then you come down with a thick stroke, connect it with a thin stroke. So now let's go to the bottom section, the bottom row, sorry. And on this section we have a few letters that are actually quite different to the rest. So we'll do the R and the S since they're both quite unique letters. So the R starts with a thin stroke up, like this. And you can either have a loop there, so you can actually have a proper loop so it goes all the way around, or you can just do it so it's like a little ball. You bring it back through, and then it'd be a thick stroke down and a thin flick back up again. Let's do the letter S. So you start with a thin stroke up, and you can either just bring it straight back down with a thick stroke, or you can sort of loop it there like that. Whatever you find easiest with that letter. So that's them two. The letter T, I'll do that because it's got a crossbar for it, just to give you an idea of how I do that. So it'll be a thick stroke down, a little flick, and normally I hold the pen like this when I'm doing a letter, but for like things like this I tend to hold it more on an angle so you get more of a flick, and you can actually manoeuvre your hand with it as well. So I'm just gonna do a little flick on that. That wasn't the greatest, but you get the point. U's pretty straightforward. I do the W. So W would be a thick stroke down like this. Curve it to a thin stroke back up to the top. Thick stroke down, curve it, So this one can either be a thick or a thin, but a lot of the time what I like to do is start off thin at the bottom and then come up to being thick line at the top. But if you want to just follow the guide and just do a thin stroke, that's absolutely fine. So for example, that'd be a thin stroke. But what I like to do is start thin and go thick at the top like that. It just gives the letter form a bit more variety. So again, that would be the same for the V, except for it'd just be this section here. The X is another weird letter, so we'll do that one. So thick stroke down, and just follow the guide. So you have a nice curved sort of shape. And then again, the thick stroke can either be a thin or thick line, or you can start off thin and go thick, which tends to be what I do. But if you want to follow the guide again, just do a thin line like this, you can do that. Or if you want to do what I do, is add a bit of a thick stroke towards the top there. The letter Y is pretty straightforward, it's just similar to some of the other letters that we've worked on. So let's go to the Z, or Z if you're American. This is a weird letter. A lot of people have this shape and then from here they'll loop it round, which you can do, that's totally fine. But the style that I usually work in, I have a letter Z which is quite normal. So I'm going to start off with a tiny flick at the top here. And again, this is horizontal one, so this can be thick or thin, but I tend to do it thick, thick down, and thick. So the whole letter Z is quite thick when I do it. There's just the thin points at the top and bottom here. So start off here, do a thin sort of stroke like that, bring it down, and then again with another sort of flick like that. And that's pretty much it. So like I said before, there'll be a download link to both the original version, and I'll put a version with the hand lettering that I've done over it to give you a bit of a reference. And if you have any questions about anything graphic design related, hand lettering related, or just anything in general about me personally, feel free to ask me in the comments down below, because I'm actually thinking of doing some commentary style videos where I show you some work that I'm doing and then I'll talk over the video and explain why I'm doing it, what I'm doing. And there's only so much that you can really talk about a design, in my opinion, so with the spare time left in that video, I'll probably be answering some questions from you guys, be it personal, or like I said before, hand lettering, or just anything graphic related. So drop a comment in the comment section down below asking me any questions you have, and let me know what other sort of tutorials you want to see. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching.